At my sister's wedding, there was no seat for me. One guest whispered, "Didn't she try to take her own life?" My sister giggled, that was her latest performance piece. I looked around. Funny. I survived. Unlike your marriages. Everyone froze. I hadn't seen my sister, Cassandra, in nearly 5 years. Not that it was intentional, more like the kind of family estrangement that builds up over time without anyone really noticing. She was the youngest of us 3 siblings, and while we had once been close, I felt like she and our father always thought they were better than me. The quiet one, the black sheep. Cassie had always been the darling, the one who could do no wrong. Things started to fall apart after my marriage ended, which, in hindsight, I now realize was probably a turning point for everyone. Divorce has a way of highlighting the cracks in family relationships that were there all along, and I'd learned that too late. After the separation, I disappeared into myself, lost in grief, and it didn't help that Cassie and Dad seemed to be living in this perfect little bubble while I was left to pick up the pieces. So, when Cassie got engaged, I didn't expect her to invite me. And when she did, I was shocked. A small part of me thought, maybe she missed me. Maybe things can go back to normal. But I wasn't sure what kind of reception I'd get. I wasn't sure I even wanted to go. Still, I went. It was a wedding, for God's sake, and there was no reason to stay away just because it felt awkward. I owed it to her, I told myself. I owed it to me. The venue was a place I'd driven past hundreds of times, a fancy hotel on the outskirts of the city. It used to be a place I associated with celebrations, family dinners, holidays, but now it felt foreign, like I had walked into a world I no longer belonged to. I arrived early, hoping to avoid the crowds and find a quiet corner to settle into. I needed to collect myself before seeing anyone. I hadn't spoken to my father in months, and as for Cassie, we hadn't exchanged more than a few awkward texts in the last year. But when I stepped into the grand lobby, all that self-preparation vanished. It wasn't even that anyone outright ignored me. It was the subtle way they looked through me. My father, for example, was chatting away with some distant relatives, giving me that cold stare I knew too well. He wasn't one for apologies or recognition of past mistakes. I hated how easy it was for him to pretend like everything was fine. Cassie was standing near the entrance, greeting guests, her smile almost blinding as she posed for pictures with people I didn't recognize. She caught sight of me for a moment, her eyes flashing with something that was too quick to read before she plastered that same warm smile on her face. I walked over, my heart in my throat. She didn't seem to notice I was standing there for a few seconds, her attention split between the crowd and her phone. I stood still, waiting. "Cassandra," I said, when I could no longer hold back. She looked up, a flash of recognition crossing her face. "Oh. You're here," she said, her voice casual. Too casual. There was no rush to hug me or even welcome me properly. It was like I was just another guest, someone she had to acknowledge but not really see. "I'm glad you could make it." That was it. No warmth. No questions about how I had been. No "I missed you" or even "how are you?" Just, "I'm glad you could make it." I was used to this, I reminded myself. Used to the distance, the coldness. I nodded, forcing a smile that I knew didn't reach my eyes. "Is there somewhere to sit?" I asked, looking around. Cassie hesitated for a moment. "Oh, we're a little tight on seating, but we'll find you a place soon. Don't worry about it." She didn't seem too concerned, though, and neither did anyone else. I was left standing there, awkwardly clutching my purse like I didn't belong. The feeling wasn't unfamiliar. As the ceremony went on, I watched from the back, the whole thing unfolding like some strange performance. Cassie looked gorgeous in her dress, perfect in every way, the glowing bride everyone had been waiting for. Her new husband, Julian, was handsome in a way that made him seem untouchable. It all felt so far removed from me. I was watching my sister live her life, one that had somehow diverged from mine so completely that I felt like a stranger in my own family. The vows were exchanged. The kiss was given. People clapped. I stayed in the back, hidden in plain sight. No one had even bothered to introduce me to any of the other guests. No one offered to take a picture of me with Cassie. I was just there. Later, during the reception, things got worse. There was a huge table set up for the wedding party and close family, but when I looked around, there was no seat for me. I wandered aimlessly, hoping that someone would notice and direct me to where I was supposed to sit, but it never came. It wasn't until I overheard a conversation between some of the guests that I realized they had been talking about me the whole time. I wasn't sure if they were aware I was standing nearby, but I caught the tail end of a whisper from one woman. Didn't she try to take her own life? I froze. The words hit me like a punch. I couldn't help but glance around at the people who were speaking, faces full of curiosity, some with pity in their eyes. I had struggled, yes. I'd gone through a time when everything felt too much to bear. But hearing it like this, from someone I didn't even know, felt like being exposed. Like all my pain had been reduced to nothing more than a piece of gossip. Cassie, standing just a few feet away with her new husband, seemed to hear it too. She looked at me and then giggled. "Oh, that was her latest performance piece," she said, her voice light, too light. The way she said it felt like a dagger. It wasn't just callous, it was cruel. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Here I was, fighting to stay alive every single day, and my own sister was making light of it in front of a crowd. Without thinking, I snapped. My voice, though shaky, cut through the air. "Funny. I survived. Unlike your marriages." The room went silent. The chatter halted, the music seemed to fade away, and I could feel every single pair of eyes turning toward me. Even Cassie and Julian stopped in their tracks, blinking at me in shock. I wasn't sure if I felt proud or terrified. But I couldn't take it back. I had to say it. And suddenly, I didn't care how the room reacted anymore. The guests shuffled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or frown. It was clear that no one had ever seen me like this before. But it wasn't about them. It was about me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like the person everyone just ignored or talked about behind closed doors. I looked at my father, who had remained silent the whole time. I could see his disapproval in his eyes, but there was something else there too. Fear. He didn't want to deal with the mess that was me, the daughter who had fallen apart and ruined the family's perfect image. Cassie's eyes were wide now, her lips trembling. I could see the hurt in her gaze, but there was also a kind of shame. Not shame for what she'd done, but shame because I had said the truth aloud. Something she didn't want the world to hear. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would they yell at me? Would they try to apologize for their cruelty? Would I get kicked out of the wedding? But in that moment, none of it mattered. I had said my piece. And I was finally free. I stood there for a few moments, my chest heaving, waiting for some kind of reaction. But all I got was silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that seemed to drag on forever. It felt like I had become the focal point of the room in a way I never wanted to be. Every pair of eyes was locked on me, some with surprise, others with judgment. But none of them seemed to really understand. Cassie's smile had faltered completely now. Her once gleaming wedding glow had dimmed, replaced by a look of disbelief. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, and I could see her trying to process what had just happened. But she didn't apologize, didn't rush to my side and ask if I was okay. Instead, she just stood there, looking at me as if I were some kind of unexpected problem. I could hear my father's chair scrape across the floor behind me, and I glanced over my shoulder to find him standing up. His usual stern, impenetrable face was now taut with a mixture of anger and confusion. He didn't know how to react, I could tell. He was probably wondering why I hadn't kept quiet like I was supposed to, why I had to make a scene. But I wasn't about to apologize for speaking the truth. Not this time. A few people in the crowd shuffled, murmuring among themselves, their voices low but thick with tension. The whispers were coming from every corner now, some intrigued, others sympathetic, some just outright judgmental. I could feel the heat of their eyes on me, like they were trying to figure out if I was the villain or the victim. I took a deep breath, the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. I didn't want to be the center of attention, but I couldn't walk away. Not now, not after everything. Is everything all right here? A voice from behind me startled me. I turned to find Julian, my sister's new husband, approaching. His face was tense, like he wasn't sure how to navigate the situation. It was obvious that he didn't know me well enough to understand the complicated dynamics of our family. I could see him trying to gauge whether this was some sort of dramatic outburst or if something deeper was going on. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice more composed than I felt. "I just think it's time for the truth to be said." Julian nodded slowly, though I could tell he was uncomfortable. "All right. But maybe we can talk about this later?" I wasn't sure if he was asking me or telling me. Either way, I wasn't interested in another polite conversation where everything would be swept under the rug again. So, I turned away, scanning the room for a way to escape. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the weight of every person's stare. I needed air. Without saying another word, I pushed through the crowd, trying to make my way to the door. As I walked, I could hear the murmurs start again, louder this time. The room was buzzing with what had just transpired, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to escape the fallout. But right then, I didn't care. I reached the door, pulling it open and stepping out into the cool evening air. The sudden rush of freedom hit me like a wave. I inhaled deeply, the fresh air filling my lungs, calming the storm that was raging inside me. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control of the situation. I found a quiet bench in the garden just outside the hotel, away from the noise and the crowds. It was still early in the evening, and the sun was starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. But none of that beauty mattered to me. All I could think about was the tension I had just left behind. The truth I had spoken was still hanging in the air, and I was torn between feeling proud and feeling sick to my stomach. I had finally said what I needed to say, but at what cost? Cassie had always been the golden child, the one everyone doted on. I was the one who had never quite fit into the mold, the one who had always been an afterthought. But was this the way to finally be seen? I wasn't sure. But I couldn't undo what had just happened. I couldn't go back into that room and pretend everything was fine. About 15 minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was my father. His presence was always unmistakable, solid, heavy, like a storm cloud hovering above me. "You shouldn't have said that," he said, his voice low and stern. He stood a few feet away, not quite approaching but still close enough to make his presence known. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't have the energy to argue. I had to say it, I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. "I couldn't keep pretending, Dad. Not after everything. You could have said it later. You could have kept it together for one night. It's not about you, you know." "It is about me," I snapped, standing up from the bench and turning to face him. "It's about everything. You think it's just about tonight, but it's not. You and Cassie and all of you, you made it about me. All these years of pretending I didn't matter, pretending like none of it ever happened. You all left me out. Not just tonight, not just during the wedding, all these years, Dad." He looked at me, eyes cold as ever, but there was something in his gaze that faltered for a second. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was annoyance that I was daring to speak so plainly to him. Either way, he didn't respond immediately. "I don't know what you expect me to say," he finally muttered. "You've made your choice. You always have." "My choice?" I asked, incredulous. "You think I chose this?" "I never chose any of this. I didn't ask for you to abandon me. I didn't ask to be made invisible in this family. You and Cassie, you two have had everything. You think I'm the one who's broken, but I'm not the one who threw everything away." He stiffened at my words, a flicker of defensiveness crossing his face. That's not fair, he said, almost harshly. You don't know what it's been like for us. You think it's been easy for Cassie to carry all the weight of everything? She's done her best. Done her best? I repeated bitterly. She's perfect, Dad. Perfect little Cassie. She's the one who gets all the love, all the attention. She's the one who gets to be the golden girl. But she doesn't have to pay for anything, does she? I'm not going to stand here and listen to you tear down your sister, he said, his voice rising, clearly irritated. She's done nothing wrong. I took a deep breath, my frustration mounting again. Maybe not, but she's not perfect. And neither are you. You've both made your choices. You chose to believe the version of me that suited you, broken, troubled, the one who couldn't get her life together. You didn't care to see who I really was, who I really needed to be. And now you're angry at me because I'm finally standing up for myself? There was no immediate answer. My father just stood there, looking at me, his jaw clenched, his face unreadable. The fight had gone out of him, or perhaps he was just tired of this, tired of me challenging him in ways that made him uncomfortable. Either way, I didn't wait for him to speak again. I turned on my heel and walked away. I left him standing there in the garden, his silence filling the space between us like a wall. There was no closure, no apology. And in some strange way, I realized that was just the way it had to be. I had been waiting for them to come to me, to apologize, to fix things. But it wasn't about that anymore. It was about me taking control of my own narrative, even if it meant alienating everyone in the process. Even if it meant being the villain in their eyes. I didn't look back. I kept walking, not bothering to look over my shoulder. There was something liberating about leaving them behind, about shedding the weight of their expectations. My father's disapproving gaze, Cassie's giggle at my expense, they all seemed to fade as I made my way out of the garden and back toward the hotel's exit. I wasn't running away. I wasn't retreating. I was walking into my future, one that no longer included pretending to be something I wasn't for the sake of their comfort. The cool night air still clung to my skin as I stepped outside. The event's festive lights twinkled from the hotel's front doors, but they didn't seem to warm me anymore. I could hear the faint buzz of the reception inside, but I was beyond that noise now. I didn't need their approval or their acknowledgement. As I walked down the steps to the parking lot, I pulled my phone from my bag. There was a message from my best friend, Jenna, asking how it was going. I typed a quick response, eventful. But I'm done. I'm out. I hit send, leaning against the car, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift. I felt free. About a week passed, and I thought I had finally put the wedding, and the chaos of that night, behind me. But then came the phone call. It was a number I didn't recognize. At first, I almost didn't pick up, but something in me told me to answer. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was the strange sense of guilt that had started creeping in. Hello? I said cautiously. Hi, is this Rebecca? A voice asked on the other end. I recognized it immediately. Cassie. I almost hung up right there. But I didn't. This is Rebecca, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. I know you're angry with me, and, with Dad, she started, sounding unsure, almost nervous. There was an awkward pause on the line. But I wanted to reach out, to apologize for what happened at the wedding. I don't know what got into me. I stayed silent for a moment, weighing her words. I wasn't trying to make light of your pain, she continued, her voice softer now. I don't know. It's like I've spent so long pretending everything's fine, pretending nothing ever went wrong, and when you snapped, it felt like everything I've been ignoring for years hit me at once. And I didn't know how to react. It was hard to imagine Cassie feeling anything more than the perfect little sister I had once known. But hearing her voice crack slightly on the other end of the line made something in me shift. I didn't want to hurt you, she added. But I did, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I had taken you for granted. I took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to tear into her, to lay all the blame for everything that had gone wrong between us squarely at her feet. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence stretch for a few seconds. "Thank you," I finally said, my voice softer than I had expected. "I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive you, but hearing you say that means something. I've spent too long being invisible to you. But you know what? It's not just your apology I need, it's mine. I need to apologize to myself for allowing this to go on for so long." I could hear Cassie's breath on the other end, like she didn't know what to say next. But there was something different in the way we were talking. The walls had come down, even if just a little. "I don't expect everything to be fixed right away," I added. "I'm not going to pretend it's all okay. But if you really want to make things better, we can try. We can start small. No promises, just trying." There was a long pause. When Cassie finally spoke, her voice was steady, even if it still carried a hint of uncertainty. "I want to try, too. I don't want things to be like they've been. I don't know how to fix everything, but I'll try. I will." I nodded to myself, though she couldn't see me. It wasn't a perfect moment, and it wasn't an immediate resolution. But it was progress. "Good," I said simply. "That's all I can ask for." Over the next few months, Cassie and I began to rebuild. Slowly, tentatively at first. We met for coffee, something we hadn't done in years. We talked, not just about the wedding, not just about the past, but about life, about what had been happening in our own worlds. I started to realize that she wasn't perfect, that she wasn't the person I had built her up to be. She was human, just like me. And maybe, just maybe, we could start over, this time as equals, not as the golden child and the failure. I also took steps to heal the rift with my father. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast. But little by little, I forced myself to face him, to have the hard conversations. I didn't need his approval anymore, but I did need to stop carrying the weight of his indifference. We weren't a perfect family. I didn't expect us to ever be. But I did expect something different: honesty, openness, a willingness to try. And after all the years of trying to prove myself to them, it felt good to finally feel like I didn't need to prove anything. I wasn't doing it for them anymore, I was doing it for myself. Then came the letter. It was from Cassie, a week before her 1-year anniversary with Julian. I had no idea what it was at first, but when I opened it, I found a card that simply said, "I've been thinking a lot about everything we talked about after the wedding. I realize now that I've taken so much from you, that I've always assumed I could just have your forgiveness, without earning it. But that's not how it works. So here I am, trying again. Trying to be the sister I should have been. And I'm sorry. Truly. I don't expect things to change overnight. But if you'll allow me, I want to be a better part of your life." I read it twice, then again, letting the words sink in. I knew that reconciliation wasn't a perfect path. That there would be bumps along the way. But there was something in that letter, something genuine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, my sister was really trying. I took a deep breath, a smile tugging at my lips. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense, not the kind I had imagined when I stormed out of that wedding. But in a way, this was my revenge. Not through cruelty, not through cutting words, but by finally making my voice heard, by surviving, and by finding a way to claim my space in the world again.